Hey y'all, Miss Harper here for our Unit 4 test review. Alright, we're going to work through about half the problems on here together. Alright, let's start with number 2. Hopefully you know how to do number 1. Number 1, all you need to do here is solve for y. Alright, so the goal for all 4 of these questions is to get our function into a y equals mx plus b format, also known as slope-intercept form. Alright, here on number 2, you have to do this the old school way. We're going to use our formula y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. This is m, this is x1, and this is y1. So I have y minus y1 equals m times x minus our x1 is 2. And then from here we distribute and solve. So I'm going to distribute on the right side first. So I would have y. Now I'm going to correct this right here. What happens whenever we get y minus a negative? That becomes a giant positive. So we get y plus 1 equals negative 5 halves x. And then negative 5 halves times negative 2 is positive 5. Okay, last step, we need to get rid of this 1 by subtracting him to the opposite side. And our final answer is negative 5 halves x plus 4. Alright, now remember, it's always a good habit to take your point and plug it back in to make sure it checks out. So let's just do that real quick to remind ourselves and remember what that looks like. So I'm going to enter in my fraction. Negative 5 halves times my x value is 2 plus 4, and hopefully it equals my y value, which is negative 1. Alright, so make sure that you're plugging that point back in. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. The next one we're going to look at is here on number 3. Alright, it needs to go through this point and that point. So you have a couple options here. You could use your new learned little calculator trick, the stat edit stuff. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and do this the old school way though. x1, y1, x2, y2, and use my slope formula. So that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Alright, so this becomes 4 plus 1, that is 5. 5 minus 0 is 5. 5 over 5 is 1. So my slope here is 1. Now I am going to take one shortcut, and that's this point right here. I can recognize that as a y-intercept. So my answer here is going to be y equals, my slope is positive 1, so 1x. Now if you want to write in that 1 here, you can. And I'm going to just steal from this point. Since this is the y-intercept, that means my y-intercept is negative 1. And that would be my final answer there. Alright, sliding down. Again, here on number 5, you can use your stat edit if you would like. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way as well. Notice that they actually did give you a y-intercept there. I'm going to do number 6 with you. Alright, so identify the line that passes through this point and is perpendicular to the line represented by this. Alright, so first thing we need to know is, what do we care to know about the given line? Well, the only thing that I care about is right here, his slope. Alright, because in order for this thing to be perpendicular, it needs to be a special slope. Now, what do we know about the slopes of perpendicular lines? You have to remember that they're the opposite reciprocal. Opposite reciprocal. Okay, so opposite means that we change our sign. So the current slope was negative 1/3. Our new slope is going to be opposite, change the sign. So now it's going to be something that's positive. And we're going to flip the fraction. That's 3 over 1, which is just positive 3. So this is my new slope. Here's the given point that it wants it to go through. From here, I can use my point slope formula again. So that's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And again, I got those points from right here. All right, I need to distribute. So I have, again, we have another double negative. I'm going to make that into a giant positive. So I have y plus 2 equals 3x minus 6 And one last step is going to be to subtract that 2 to the opposite side. So now I'm left with y equals 3x minus 8. Alright, so here's this one that goes right here. Okay, a little messy there, but y'all get the picture. Alright, so what's the slope of this line? Well, the slope here is 3. And our y-intercept, we like to list these as points, is right here, 0 and a negative 8. Alright, the 0. First you need to remember what a 0 of a function is. That's just a fancy word for an x-intercept. Right? An x-intercept is whenever you have some number for x and the value of y is 0. It's where it crosses the x-axis. Alright, so what I need to do here is I need to input a 0 in for the y value and then solve for its x value. I'm going to do that by adding 8 to the opposite side. So I have 8 equals 3x, and then to finish solving for x, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So I get x equals 8/3 when y is 0, and that is my x-intercept, or my 0. Okay, this other question says, what is the value of x when y is 10? Okay, well now that I know what my function is, I can plug in 10 for y and solve for the value of x. Alright, so I would add 8 to both sides. I have 18 equals 3x. Then divide both sides by 3. 18 divided by 3 is 6, so x would equal 6 here. Alright, to complete the table, I would plug this into my calculator. Alright, so lots of ways to do this, but I recommend just plugging it into the table. So I went to y equals, I have y equals 3x minus 8, and now I'm just going to go look at my table and fill in these missing parts. Alright, so let's see, it's asking for negative 5, negative 5, negative 23. When x is 3, y is 1. And when x is 5, when y is 7, x is 5. Alright, so use that table to your advantage. I believe this is negative 23, 1, and 5. Alright, last step is to graph this thing. Remember, we always start our graph at our y-intercept, which is at negative 8. And then from there, I'm just going to slope it up. So I have a slope of 3, so that's 1, 2, 3. Over 1. Up 1, 2, 3, over 1. Over 1. Alrighty, and then draw in that nice pretty straight line, and we're good to go over here. Onto the back, I'm going to start here on number 9. Okay, now we're talking about these scatter plots. What I need to do is I need to input these things into my calculator by going to Stat, Edit, and now I'm going to clear my list, and I'm going to enter in my new table of x and y values. Alright, so as you can see, I paused the video to input these values, so I double check my list and make sure that everything is correct, just as I see it on the paper, in which case it is. So from here, I'm going to quit back to the home screen. I'm going to go back to Stat, over to Calc, and we're doing the linear regression, option number 4. Scroll all the way to the bottom, click Calculate so we can get that. Now this one says to round to the nearest hundredth, so remember we have tenths, hundredths, then thousandths. So that means we're rounding off to tenths, hundredths. Oops. Yeah, we're only going to be rounding here to 2 decimal places. Alright, so looking here. Alright, 1 second. Alright, sorry for the little mix-up. We're actually going to round this, I need to make this correction, to the nearest thousandth. Okay, so that means 3 decimal places. So after we did this, we again input it into here. We're rounding off to 3 decimal places. Alright, so I'm going to type that or write that down now. We had y equals negative 0.019x plus 39.288. Alright, so there is my line of best fit. Said to determine the correlation coefficient and round to the nearest thousandth. Again, that's 3 decimal places. So right here, we're looking at the R value. So this, go to 3 decimal places, we look 1 to the right, 4 or less, let it rest, 5 or more, add 1 more. So we're going to add 1 more to this number, so it's going to be negative 0.982. So R equals negative 0.982. All right, and then the question says, estimate what year the population will be 0.82 million. All right, so is this 0.82 representing an X value or a Y value? Well, if I look back up here at my table, the population is representing a Y value. So what I need to do here is plug this in for my Y. So I'm going to plug this into 0.82 equals negative 0.019 X plus 9.288. And then from here, I need to solve for X to figure out what year that will be in. So I'm going to subtract this first. Alright, so first I subtracted this to the other side. I ended up with this. And now I moved it up here. My last step is going to be to divide both sides by 0, negative 0.019. So we would get X equals, let's see, type that into my calculator, and we would end up here 2024.632. So let's talk about that for a second. 2024.632. Alright, so that's if I rounded it off. Now the data that was given, they gave me in whole numbers for the years. So I need to round this to the nearest whole number. So since this is 0.6, this means that this is going to round up. So the official year here would be 2025. They could expect the population to be at 0.82. Alright, so again, whenever you're making predictions, establish, is this an X value or a Y value? If it's X, plug it in for X and solve for the Y. If it's Y, plug it in for Y and solve for the X. Last two we're going to talk about real quick are number 10 and 12. Alright, so first on number 10, it says the time required to complete a job varies directly as the number of people working. It takes 4 hours for 12 electricians to wire a building. How long would it take 9 electricians to do the job? So this is our direct variation stuff where we have y over x equals y over x. So basically we need to set up a proportion. Now it didn't exactly tell us who is y and who is x, but I'm going to say that the electricians will be y and the time it takes will be the x value. So 12 workers, 4 hours. If I have 9 electricians, how many hours will that one take? So remember, we always multiply the two numbers across from each other, then we divide by the third number. So 9 times 4 is 36. 36 divided by 12, you would get 3. So how long would it take? It would take 3 hours. Alright, last one, number 12. Let's refresh real quick on domain and range. So domain, remember we're talking about the x values here. So furthest left, well, I can't seem to mark that because I have an arrow. Furthest right, and the same thing. So since I'm going on to infinity in both directions, this is all real numbers. Alright, for the range, it's not quite the same. Remember, range is lowest to highest. So my lowest point is right here, and my highest point I cannot mark because it's going to infinity. So I'm going to start at 1. It's a closed circle and it goes all the way to infinity. Now remember, we like this answer, so I'm going to kind of convert this and switch it around. So it's going to be y, the open side is facing it. Y is greater than 1. So again, if we look at our graph, that makes sense. I have any values greater than positive 1, and this would be our official answer there. Good luck on your test. If you have any questions, go see your teacher.